Thank you to Butch and the team for allowing us to be part of the race course, and we had a terrific week at the race a couple of weeks ago with the committee, so thanks to the committee for hosting the board and yourself, which was fantastic. What I'd like to do today is, I think the best way with these things, the way these things work, is the interaction. So as I get to the end of each slide, I'll pause. If I forget to pause, say, hey, you can pause, we need to talk. And if we get to the end of the presentation and we haven't clarified any issues for you, let's have question and answer and feedback amongst ourselves, providing as much information we can is really important from our perspective. So I'll kick off. As you're well aware, over the last 18 months, 2 years, there's been two tranches of legislation that's been introduced into Parliament, driven by Rita and Matt, and now the New Zealand TAB. And there was in addition to the process around appointments to the TAB and appointments to the Racing Integrity Board, there's also been a collaborative body set up called Racing New Zealand. And a lot of people ask me, what does Racing New Zealand do? It's a 3-code forum. There's equal voting, and really discussions we've had to date, meeting on once a month. Hopefully that goes to once every couple of months over a period of time. But to give you a feel of the types of things that Racing New Zealand discusses and focuses on, is we've done a Southland Otago review. That was off the back of last year's annual race dates, where Harness tried to take dates away from Forbury Park, and through a process that wasn't proper in terms of the club at Forbury Park saying that the proper process wasn't followed, we did a review. And we thought we part of that review with the 3 codes because of the venues and the activities in the region. So that report, we'll put that up on our website in the next couple of weeks. It's kind of the clubs in the regions. In essence, Forbury Park will discontinue racing at their venue, and those dates will be spread across other parts of the Southland and Otago regions. As for us, in terms of thoroughbred racing, there's some interesting data that's been put to us, and the data says that we've got a declining horse population, we've got a declining participation rate in that region. So it's been an eye-opener for the clubs in that region, and the recommendation out of the report is have another look at it in 5 years. The work we've already done around venue planning down there is sound, according to the independent review, but we've got more work to do in order to encourage participation and investment in tracks and infrastructure. A couple of the other things the Racing New Zealand Board have talked about is the timing of board appointments to the TAB and the Racing Integrity Board. The NZTR Board are very proactive in this area. You may have seen some publicity over the last couple of weeks where the Minister has called for further nominations from the codes in terms of future directors, and there has been what I'd call, what's the best way to describe this, other codes, not thoroughbred racing. There's a question mark over the nominations that have been made to the Minister. Right, the Minister has an appointments panel in place that has Liz Dawson and Anne Kirwan and Helen Galbraith as a group of 3 that are providing recommendations to the Minister. The Minister's not satisfied with the calibre of people that are currently on the list, so each code's been encouraged to put more people forward. The NZTR Board has been very proactive, met twice, and will make further recommendations. It'll reinforce Jason Fleming as NZTR's candidate for the NZTR position on the TAB New Zealand Board. As far as the Racing Integrity Board is concerned, they have called for nominations, and we are working through that at the moment. Recruitment, clearly one of the important aspects of the change to the legislation and the new statutory approach to the new Racing Integrity Board. That's taking the RIU and the JCA into one business, known as the Racing Integrity Board. The Minister will run in parallel the appointment of both the TAB and the Racing Integrity Board in the same process, but it'll be finalised by August. And an ad was put in the paper 3 weeks ago, both in Australia and New Zealand, for replacement for Mike Watt. But Mike Watt was decided he's 67, it's time to sit back and let someone else take up the role. It is a big role, it's an important role, administering and implementing the operational aspects of the 3 codes rules of racing, and it's an important function, a cornerstone of what we stand for, and that's the integrity in our racing. 3 and other things we've worked across the 3 codes around approach to protocols. I have to say, I think the industry's done a fantastic job. It's just not one group, it's a collective group of clubs and various stakeholders and sector groups that have been able to communicate to the industry, be agile, be flexible and be proactive in giving guidance to the industry in terms of what we need to do through the pandemic. And we're 12 months, it seems like only yesterday, but 12 months ago, you know, mayhem broke out. But thank you to everyone. There's people in this room like Butch and Dennis and clubs and Mark. You've all played an important role in helping us get to where we got to today. Now, when we looked at some of the things we were seeing back in April and May, some of the numbers that we're starting to see that were coming out of TAB, a bit like Armageddon to be frank, but I think the industry did a great job, the TAB's done a good job, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up from where we've been and where we are today, and we know we've got lots of work to do to take the next step. There's a lot of businesses in New Zealand that are a lot worse off than us with the support of the government, the work the TAB's done, the work the codes, the sector groups and the clubs have done. You all should feel very proud. That's not to say we haven't finished. We've got a lot of work to do, but there's been a lot of work going behind the scenes. That one's the most interesting one. I said to the other two codes, if we're going to have a debate, that's what we're going to have it, the development of a code funding model. There is a need to develop a longer term code funding arrangement based on the projections from the TAB and also the development of our racing and betting in Australia. That's Australian punters betting on New Zealand racing, and we've seen good growth in those numbers across the wagering operators that are betting on New Zealand racing, which we have agreements for now, which the codes are receiving that money. It's part of our current funding. And race starts, coming together with the three codes, working through with TAB. TAB, and it's a good, respectful from relationship. We might put up some dates. TAB will say, that I've got a problem servicing that, or I don't think you're maximising turnover. We have a discussion, a debate, and then we get on with the other three codes and map out a program. And that's done through programming groups and club consultation and sector group consultation. Then we go into the washing machine with the TAB. The TAB take all that data and they produce their budget. And that budget will be available to us. We'll get an early view of that budget in May, which will help guide our expenditure, NZTR's expenditure around stakes and other things throughout May. So that's a bit of a snapshot of the three codes working together on what I'll call 6 good projects that it's the reason the three codes have to come together and arrive at a sensible solution in each of these areas. Any questions?
You mentioned before that with the appointments to the TAB NZ, would I be getting it right is that our new Minister of Racing was rather proactive in moving ahead and just saying, hey, I want to see some more nominations rather than just rubber stamping the Department of Consumer Affairs?
Correct. I think Grant Robinson's been fantastic. I mean, Winston has been terrific, don't get me wrong, without Winston and getting us through the last 12 months. But having a Minister as Deputy Prime Minister of this country is invaluable. He understands racing. He's well connected into the TAB and Dean. He's having regular discussions. He's got the interests at heart. So I'm really positive about the future. He's given us, so what's happened, the 2 tranches of legislation have been said. The industry, here it is. Let's put the right people in place, then it's over to you to run your business. We can't go knocking on the door to the government saying, Winston will fix it, Grant will fix it. No, those days are gone. We have to take decisions, and they won't all be, we won't have 100% of people saying, yeah, that's a great idea. There will be some tension, as we've had some tension the last 2 or 3 years. So he's good for racing, he loves his racing, and he'll make decisions in the best interest of racing. Our finances. So through the period that we've come out of COVID, we're likely to show a surplus of $3 to $4 million. I'm hoping it's at the 4 million plus end, but our trading performance into Australia has been very positive. Been good growth. There's been good growth in New Zealand. We're 10% up. I'll show you those numbers in a minute. The other thing that has created lots of discussion out there is around paying back to 14th, right? So I know everyone's got a different view on that, but it has worked. It has through this period that we've gone through, and the board will review that in May. It has helped us fund additional races, fund additional race meetings, got our average field size up, has driven wagering turnover, has been, you know, I've had both arguments put to me. It's bad for owners. It's good for owners because not only has NZTR, the industry, taken out $1.7 million of cost from the industry from noms and acceptances, paying back to that number has offset the cost of the jockey's fee, right? But it's also another important, the biggest issue is that there's about $1.2 million that has gone back into the system when we haven't had a full field of 14. We've used $650,000 of that money to run extra race meetings and extra races. So it has improved the opportunity, it's improved field sizes, and it's been a very useful tool through COVID. And the board has said in May we'll have another look at it. All right? The dot point 3 is also very important because we all have to remember 2 years ago we were receiving money that we hadn't earned. So codes, TAB were providing distributions and the codes were spending it, but we hadn't earned it. What's been important with I'll call it the re-engineering of the financials of TAB, which re-engineers the finances of TAB, it's given back on a sustainable footing where TAB is saying to us, quite rightly, through COVID, until we understand the full impacts of COVID, every 3 months we have to check, right, to make sure the distributions to the codes and the performance of the TAB are aligned. You can't keep spending money that you haven't earned. It's really important. So there's been a big shift there. Our objective now is how do we grow the pie. We've also had a discussion with the board, how do we establish two things, a cash reserves policy to make sure we can manage the cash flow through the year, because as we're all well aware, we don't get paid at the same rate that when we run the Derby at $1 million, for example. We get a 12-month distribution from the TAB, but there are, from November, December, January, February, calls on our cash reserves. That means we have to have a buffer. And a policy that we had in place was a $3 million buffer. The board decided last month that's not enough. We have to have a $6 million cash reserve to manage our cash flow and potentially, if there is any downturn, as much as possible help with that, with any downturn. But where we've gone to date, it's been great. Every month we're checking it with the TAB. It's been good working relationships between the finance manager of the codes and the general manager of finance at TAB, managing the cash position of the industry, and full credit to that team where we've got to today. And importantly, we don't know what the other side of COVID looks like. Still strong, still good, with 10% up, 10% plus up, which is really good. GBR, gross betting revenue, has been good. But we have to be there's some level of conservatism that we have to apply, and we're waiting with bated breath on what the TAB are going to tell us in May. Wagering performance for the 28th of Feb. Touched on before, some good progress there, 9% up year to date at the end of Feb. More starts, less races, average field size up. There's harness racing, greyhound racing. Greyhound racing's come off a bit in March, which whether there's large punters not engaging. But overall, the New Zealand racing turnovers are up 8%, overseas racing's up 12%, and total racing turnover up 10.9%. So they're really healthy numbers from what we were seeing back this time, in April, May last year. So full credit to the industry. It's been, as I said, it's been a team effort. But that bottom line, we need to be cautious. I was at a meeting yesterday in the CD. Stakes, yes, but it's got to be done so it's sustainable. We don't want to be ramping stakes up and then next year saying it's not sustainable. So it's really important that we do build a sustainable model for the industry. Just an update on our current projects. You're all well aware in this area, in this region, Cambridge has built and is working for training and trialling. We have our first race meeting 19th of May. Riccarton, I was down there Saturday, really good progress being made there. That project will be completed in July. Allan Pooney, I was up there yesterday, and they will have a project plan ready to go to turn the first sod by October. They're working through their funding. The PGF, as you're aware, through the funding model that the government provided us, put $10 million into Allan Pooney, $10 million into Riccarton, 6.5 into Cambridge, and that's allowed the industry to build that infrastructure. Really important as a foundation. allows us to build out regional models of the future. WIP consultation, we've had 27 responses to WIP consultation. One of the interesting aspects that the team internally did, we actually said for the month of January, go and take every race, look at the first 4 over 9 and see how many times the jockeys used the whip. And in that month, it's been 7.4 times in a race that the jockeys have used the whip for the month of January. So what we've done, we've gone back and said to the team, give us another set of data, look at January, look at December and January, but split it between industry days and group listed days. So we get a feel for what's actually happening, because we've never done that. Because I think the jockeys have done a good job. We've gone to the Australian, the jockeys have done a good job in adapting to what we call a community view about overusing the whip, and the penalty regimes tied into that very important. So we, in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a meeting up in the Waikato with the jockeys, present that data, and talk them through that to see where we might evolve to in terms of the future use of the whip. NZTR also will update, and after some consultation with clubs, sector groups, handicap programming and trip preparation policy, and the cash reserves I've touched on. Project Wellbeing is another 3 code. That probably should be the 3 code bucket, but there is a project that's been worked through with 3 codes in terms of health and safety, caring for your mate in the industry, calling out bad behaviour is something that we get regular feedback on, not only in thoroughbred racing, but across the other 2 codes. So we've joined together and we'll use industry participants in the program where we've been able to get some funding at a Class 4 game to build out a program that we'll use across our social media platform. Reinforcing the racing industry is a safe place to work. Reinforce that we do look after our people, and it's really important we get those continuing messages across by industry people. Club Digital Network, clubs have embraced the idea that we've partnered with the clubs in building out new digital platforms for the clubs. There's been 36 platforms built to date. Off the one back end, that's sharing technology across the clubs. We all appreciate the digital age, they call it digital transformation. It's a page where you can interact, look at your races, look at what a membership costs, look at what events run, and it's been some really good work, I've got to say, that we've been able to do with the clubs, and we'll build out a digital platform for every club, and we'll partner with the clubs on future development in those areas. Some clubs didn't have a website, other clubs hadn't invested in websites for many years, and other clubs were just about to invest. So every club was at a different stage, and we've been able to work with them, and by the middle of the year have a website for every club across the country. And that'll lead to other updates like common ticketing systems, photography portals, sponsorship opportunities. All the sites I've seen, there's good linkages back to each of the club sponsors. So if you get a chance, go on the website. Hawke's Bay's up, good site. There's others up, and we really encourage you to start to use that sort of technology. The Race Limited Partnership, that's been a business that Harness Racing have said to us as of last Monday, they don't want anything to do with. They'd like out. Our funding from the TAB to fund that business ceased in January last year, and we now have to evolve another model. What does a new model look like? And we'll be engaging with there's 39 events across the country, thoroughbred clubs that use that service on an annual basis. We now have to think about what does that future look like. And it's basically the canvas, the tables and chairs, marquees, infrastructure that rolls out to 39 events across the country in order to help the experience of a feature race meeting. Horse welfare, one of the key aspects that Artie Burns is working on is having accredited retrainers and rehomers across the business. Another important area is education and training. We're in the final stages of developing an accredited track work riders program. A lot of feedback from the trainers wanting qualified people to ride horses at work. And we've been working with the Trainers Association. There's a proposal going to the board about how do we assist in training, educating and making compliant a track work rider for trainers. because as you're all aware, there's a step from riding a pony to riding a horse track work. There's a big gap there. We did do a bit of an exercise about 3 months ago and said who'd be interested on Facebook, and we've got 107 replies. I was a bit surprised we've got that many, so we hope there's a market there that we can develop. But we need to put the right program in place, the pathway program in place. It'll be a mixture of practical assessment on the horse, a panel reviewing the performance, and also some online training that Massey University will provide for us. There will be a cost to the participant, and hopefully we can get some of that funded through some Class 4 gaming funds.
Bernard, there was one on the touch on the Racing Australia platform.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So we are in the background working through an integration and a license fee of the Racing Australia platform. In addition, we're also upgrading our Technology One finance platform, and that's a major undertaking. It's, you know, we're technology that's 15 years old, and there was two ways we could go. We could either build it ourselves or partner with Racing Australia to buy a license through the Racing Australia platform. Sometimes think, why do we take such a big project on? We've taken it on, and we're right in the middle now of building out some customisations, and I call it New Zealandising what we need in New Zealand. There's a data migration, data integration, and 64 customisations to the Racing Australia platform that we have to have done, and it will make a step change to us. They've just upgraded a studbook over there. We'll have access to that. So any module that sits in Racing Australia and is used by the states, this license fee, the license fee will be approximately $230,000 a year to have. But any module that's built, we will have access to. But in round terms, when you spend $1 on a development opportunity in a platform, we represent about 4 to 5% of the total market between Australia and New Zealand. So longer term, it is a cost-effective way. Some of the things they do in Australia, they do better than us, but there are some things that they learn from us. The existing handicapping system, for example, there's functionality within our system we need to replicate into our version of the Australian instance in the single national system. So the Technology One is a platform that we used to use in conjunction with New Zealand Racing Board. We have to have now a licence on our own, and you'll see some improvement in terms of how we manage debt, how we manage invoices. We have been using 3 finance systems to get to quite a cumbersome way of doing our accounts. So it is a tidy up, it is a big project, and we're targeting at the end of the year to go live. The first phase of the Technology One interface will be done in June, and the ultimate interface with Technology One, Racing Australia, and our website is a project that all comes together at the end of the year. And tomorrow we've got a meeting to determine that exact date based on the level of customisations that Racing Australia are building out for us. Our team happy to get familiar with that, and we've appointed Michelle Dando to help with the education and training around the country, getting out to trainers, running education sessions, because what we want to do, we've got 50% of our trainers that use the system online. How do we get the next 50%? We'll have to get the existing 50% to understand the new system, then have the other 50%. Because we do want to move to a position, the board hasn't finalised the position on this, but you know, to have at some point in the future everything online is the right way to go. But we understand we need to take the industry on a journey, and it will allow us to do that over the next couple of years.
Brendan, just on the one thing that I believe is going to be our biggest issue going forward is the welfare issue. And just where are you at with that at the moment? Obviously, I've had a few discussions with you over it, and
so the 1% welfare levy that we flagged at the AGM last year, it will be, there's changes to the software. It's taken a little bit longer than what we expected. It's in final testing now, and we'll probably go live 1st of May at the latest. Now that money is 1% of $52 million. That's 520,000. It's got to go into retrainers, rehomers, education, research, horse ambulances, those type of activities that help with the welfare of the horse.
But even going to this, like we had a discussion the other day with the activists and things like that, how are we approaching it at the moment? You know, it's like, you know, because the reality is we've got some good stats on how we look after animals, and we probably just don't promote it well enough that how well these animals are looked after. We don't, and it's, you know, that letter that we talked about the other day.
There is a response going back. So
Yep.
It's on James's job to do it. He's just got a bit, but he's going because we discussed in the board meeting in March. It's got to be done by next month.
Project Wellbeing.
Yep.
Big discussion going on around hours expected of staff from stables. Has NZTR taken any position there yet?
Just in relation to, sorry.
The hours worked by stable staff. Early starts, 3:30 starts.
Yep.
It's mostly taking place in Australia, but it's knocking on the door here too.
It is. Yeah, I was part of doing that research in Australia about 6 years ago, and the research said trainers didn't want it, but there are some trainers in Australia now looking to start earlier. If the trainers want to do it, let's sit down and talk about it. But if the trainers still want to work their horses at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, how do we do that?
It's a
Do you think is there a groundswell there to do
I'm
it?
not saying there is no, but it's out there.
Yeah.
I think it's
both the club and code level.
Right.
it's coupled up with the whole staffing thing. You know, like the two conversations need to be had at the same time. You know, like if you're talking about bringing in this next generation of track work riders and stable staff, that's a huge barrier.
So when we researched the track work riders in Australia, the majority of the feedback came back from the track work riders. I like it because I can go and do another job. I like it because I can go and do my study. I like it because I've got a family. There were a couple of negatives, but when you looked at the research, people telling us I'm agreeing with you, Danny. That's why we did the research. I thought it'd show up, but it actually came back in the way that I thought. Well,
but I think the research is dealing with the existing people as opposed to the potential people, and so you're not asking the question of the potential people: would you come and work those hours?
You also have to complete blind trainers. You can't just have a few trainers saying, okay, we're going to start at 7 because that gives first use of the track because other trainers that don't go.
No, I think it'd have to be club driven, wouldn't it, from the key training centres as to who.
It's easier said than done, Andrew. I'm sorry. Easier said than done.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes, we need to find a way, if there are trainers out there that want to train differently and run a new model, it's on the list.
Bernard, just in terms of Racing Australia, are we looking at potentially changing our track rating systems and the data that needs to be in common with them? And do we do that beforehand, before migrating to that system?
We talked about that yesterday. Yes, we'd like to. Yep.
And also, will the New Zealand race meetings now be available on the Racing Australia website? So all the
not the Racing Australia website.
No.
I didn't win that.
Didn't win that one.
Who would like to win that one?
So, but the track rating thing is, theirs is far from perfect. And as far as Agon, if you look at his form, it shows that all his form's on soft tracks. Well, that's not true. I mean, the track at Ellerslie was not soft. The track at Riccarton, when he won the Guineas, I don't think was soft. So they have a very, they don't have the easy category or dead, for want of a better term. So they basically go to soft very quickly. So, it's all very well to say we've got to be the same as Australia, we've got to be the same as Australia. I think that their rating at the moment is a long way away from perfect and probably doesn't take into account how very wet our tracks get. So to have the extra heavy rating here is also extremely helpful.
I think there'd be at least a 6-month grey area period, wouldn't there? There'd be at least a 6 months worth of grey area once you've implemented it. Converting 6-month-old form, as Butch is saying, with Agon's form's a prime example.
Yeah.
But going forward, if you had that system, that we would have to declare that Agon was running on slow tracks. Well, they're not slow.
Yeah, I
They
think.
go very quickly from good to slow.
What are they, soft 5 or something? Is that what they call them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'd get a different feel for what a soft 5 is too.
Yeah, I think the script is important too, in getting that understood. And it's not, Butcher's right, this isn't perfect. I mean, just because you've got a track rating and a descriptor, doesn't mean the tracks are right in Australia. So there's debates go on all the time in terms of what a track, how a track runs.
Bernard, please. With the track riders, will New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing make submissions to the Inland Revenue Department to possibly have the track riders rated under the schedule of payments system?
Good question. Good question. I don't know the answer to that. I would have thought that's the employer's responsibility.
No, because they are self-employed. They do not have employees.
They're contractors.
Yes,
Contractors.
but they are presently left out of the schedule of payments system.
Can I take that one?
That'd be handy for some.
What happens with the cash flow?
The 1% that's coming out, it's not coming out of state money, is it?
Yes.
It is coming out of state money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just to remember that where we were, we took $1.7 million out of owners' costs for norms and acceptance fees. So you've got to go back and deduct, and then $500,000 for welfare. So the owners aren't, can't say materially behind. We all know we want more prize money, but it's not a negative on where you were.
Well, the
People do lose sight. When you take a fee away, it gets lost pretty quickly. But the owners and trainers were funding $1.7 million for the runs and acceptance fees prior to COVID.
Will the 1% be inclusive of goods and services tax?
You asked some good questions today.
Mr. Bean for that.
That's the second one you've stuck in. Well, it depends on. You would have thought so? Plus GST, yeah. Any other questions on that list of projects? Just a couple of points of clarification that we get asked from time to time. And I've picked this up at the Whitby Tilly Christchurch and yesterday at the CD. Payment of stakes on a fortnightly basis. The only reason we not pay stakes on a fortnightly basis is when there's a squad. Has that been your experience, or has it been later than a fortnight?
What about travel subsidies on the owner's settlement account? Speaking.
Let me do. So let's come back to that. So the prize money payments. Have owners in this room been receiving the fortnightly payment at that time, or has there been slippages? We did have a problem across Christmas and New Year with some of the laboratories' results coming back with swabs. But generally, you're getting paid on a fortnightly basis when there's a check. Yes? Generally.
My experience.
Yeah, okay.
It's like minimal compared to those.
All right. Sorry, now, the travel subsidies?
Notified by a club, in our case, on the Monday after a feature meeting.
Yep.
Yeah. I believe won't be taken out of our, won't be debited against us until end of March, or a month after the event. Surely that would be part of the owner's settlement account pertaining to that meeting rather than delay it.
Yeah, let me,
There might be a few moving parts. I know Rickett and put the money on themselves.
no, they sent us the,
Yeah.
let me, can I check it for you?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it seems like it, you want to do it at the time.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. time of the meeting. When you're
Well,
paying
time and
to
everything else is done around that meeting.
Yep. The SAR report, just want to make it clear, it's been used as a basis for the reform, but any work done around the privatising or joint venture or partner with the TAB is the TAB NZ role. A lot of the groups think that we drive that, we don't. Our role, TAB's role is selling bets, our role is the governance and the promotion and development of the thoroughbred racing industry. So I know I get asked that question quite a bit, and having a discussion with Dean the other day, very clear that TAB will have a vision around 5 years. They've got an obligation to put back to the Minister their statement of intent for the next 5 years. And there are areas of the business that will be reviewed, but that's all part of reporting on the statement of intent back to the government.
On that matter, Bernard, there's a bit of talk at the moment about a demerger of Tabcorp. Is that a concern or just something you've got to roll with? I know you can't speak on behalf of TAB.
No, I think you just got to roll with it. I mean, it's something that I know that the team at the TAB are mindful of. They know WA sitting there, there's been no transaction done. They know there's a potential demerger, they know there's a licence renewal for Victoria coming up in either 22 or 24. So, yeah, no, they're aware of all those moving pieces. They're also looking at ways to maximise the use of the fixed odds betting platform and other models of betting and wagering in this country. So they're not sitting there not thinking about it.
I'm not saying they are, but I just wondered if it was...
Yeah, no, they're well aware of all those activities and those moving pieces. The team need to work through how do we best position the New Zealand industry and the New Zealand TAB. And partnering, I think what's important, Love Racing is becoming a more, an important asset for the industry in terms of working with clubs. We've seen some good examples of that over the last, over the Christmas and New Year period. We've got 80 to 100,000 people a month coming to the site and engaging in, whether it's racing information, whether it's Facebook and sharing the narrative about trainers, jockeys and owners. And it's something we need to work together with the clubs in the industry on. It's something we can do on our own. It's a collective efforts to improve that destination. And I suppose in its simplest form, what we want to create longer term is the Love Racing with the experience in breeding, the experience in racing, the experience in news, live vision, race replays, club events, and pull that together so when anyone wants to know something about racing in New Zealand, they can go to one destination. No, it's all right, watch it.
Now we might try and just open some windows
and that's Love Racing. I have to say that
no, they don't open fast.
every time I stand up here, there's always someone that asks me about Love Racing. That's why it's on the list today. But it's a project that we started 3 years ago. We have 3 staff working on it, and it's providing good industry profile. The next really step we have to take with this is working with the TAB and senior management of TAB very clearly said we don't need to duplicate content. We need to be working together in sharing content, not only with clubs, TABs, Andrew's business. We get good facilitation out of. Even Danny at NZRB, we should that whole how do we build out a destination where everyone can come and get their data, get their information, get their live vision around anything to do with New Zealand thoroughbred racing and breeding.
Sorry, what's alphabet soup? What's NZRB?
NZB event.
NZB, I said. Did I say RB? Sorry, NZB, New Zealand Livestock.
No.
So we, very in a small way, we said to the team this year, how can we help you promote your sale, right? And that's an important platform for owners, right? With 15,000 owners we've got access to, so information around things that are the levers for the industry to promote the sport is really important, and we use digital technology to do that. So the last part of this is basically in lockdown, the board discussed what do we need to focus on in the coming months and years to ensure that TAB sells bets and NZTR's got to get on with running the business. So what are the key areas that we need to focus on? And the new board and the new and old have come together, working really well together and challenging each other and talking about what do we need to do for the future. So what we've done, we're calling these reshaping projects for the future. And there's 7 projects where each will be, next week, we'll release a time frame where the board and management will be held accountable to the industry around the actions that it's going to take, including consultation documents, data flows, and being held accountable for delivery of those projects. So there's 7 modules as part of the reshaping project, in addition to the Clubs Digital and Racing Australia projects that we've started in the last 7 or 8 months. The 7 modules are a clear framework for key focus, and it's important that the industry gets visibility of these, because some of the feedback we get from the industry, we don't know what you're doing, we don't know what you're accountable for. We don't know if you've started something and whether you've delivered it. So the board have been very focused on making public 7 projects from the racing product, venues, participants, clubs, marketing, wagering content, and the business of racing. Now that doesn't, of course, we all understand the importance of prize money. The prize money is driven off the back of the TAB's distributions to the industry. And where do we need to focus our attention in terms of delivering key activities that can drive improved participation, improved revenue, that then flows back in prize money. So, the first one is the racing product. The NZTR board will have, and it's tied into the next one, what do we want our future racing product to look like? So there's a number of pieces of work that have been done and will need to be undertaken before this consultation process goes out. There's pattern reviews, there's work that's been done on the calendar through lockdown to say what's our future vision look like, how do we continue to drive wagering. That's tied into venues because we know Auckland are going to go through a track reconstruction in March next year, and that potentially limits the availability of Auckland for a period of time. I know Butch will want to do a renovation here at some point again, he's just done one. So we need to work with the clubs and make sure as we change the program it aligns with the venue footprint we have. And we want to put out a 3 to 5 year view of what that could look like. Do we need to have such thing as a Breeders' Championship? How do we reinvent the racing calendar to drive greater participation in wagering, greater participation in events, with an eye on understanding also the Australian market? And if we're going to get cut through the Australian market, we have to be innovative outside of the Caracamians and our Wellington Cups and our NZ, New Zealand Cups and all our big features, get good coverage. But how do we make sure on a regular basis that we're touching the hearts and minds of not only the industry, but touching into other markets? So we have to think differently. We can't leave things the same. So the purpose of creating a framework around our racing product and what can that look like is really important. And we're going to be up for ideas. When we do release the consultation document, we'll be looking for other ideas. The venues, we've clearly done two phases of our venue plan. Phase 3 needs to be done. What's our footprint look like with 3 synthetic tracks now completed? There's lots of discussions going on up and down the country. In Auckland, 3 clubs are working together on some outcomes. I know in the Waikato there's conversations that have started, and what do we do around future footprints in the Waikato? If I step you through the CD, you have a pool, I'm all right. Things like the Horowhenua, Foxton, Levin and Otaki, we've had a number of meetings with those clubs to say, how do you work together? You can't leave everything, you can't just leave those things on their own. New Plymouth have got a tenancy issue. Hawke's Bay, there's a view that Hawke's Bay at some point will be developed for housing. So what's Hawke's Bay Racing look like on the other side of that? What does Wellington look like? So there's conversations happening all around the country that we need to continue to evolve, because the infrastructure we've got today is not satisfactory for our customer, and we need to keep driving innovation. And one of the good things I've noticed around the venue plan, it has, when we went out and consulted on the first one, clubs would say, no, don't worry about me, I'm all right, go to the club next door. What it's starting to do is get clubs to talk together in regions, which is good. And we don't expect these things to happen overnight. They're 3, 4, 5 and 10 year plans, but all these little projects around the country are all going to take a bit of time and a bit of effort and resource and some open-mindedness to say what can racing look like. So what we want to do is put out phase 3 of the venue plan and start to challenge some of those things. Once we get, synthetic tracks, what's that going to look like? We started with Cambridge. Rickenham will have allocated dates to the Rickenham synthetic at the back end of next racing season. The following season will be Alberni. So what does that mean for the tracks around each of those areas? What role will they play? And we did a bit of that in the first phase. We always said as this new infrastructure was built, as we got access to money, as clubs evolved, we continue to look at it on an annual basis. And this will be something that the board and the clubs will look at every year to see where renovation programs are, where track reconstructions are, and plan that alongside our racing program. We can't have clubs saying, "Oh, I'm going to do something in 4 months' time," but don't worry about the next year's calendar. It's got to be an integrated approach. Really important. Participants touched on before about the need to develop good training for participants, and one of the things that we want to have is a pathway program for trainers, a pathway program for jockeys, a pathway program for track riders, stable runners, and it be clearly understood. So if a person outside of racing knocks on their door, they need to know where to go. They need to understand what the pathway looks like. We need to explain it to them. We need to partner with quality training institutions. NZTR is not a training provider. We've got to set the criteria, we've got to set the pathways up, and then partner with those educational facilities to deliver people into the industry. And it's a massive issue for us. It's not an easy fix, but we need to start something, both across breeding and racing. Clubs, two projects within clubs is the club funding model. How do we continue to work with clubs to deliver facilities required for racing? Interesting aspect, with Alistair Robertson finishing up at race, Paul Humphreys came to me and said, is there an opportunity in finding Alistair's replacement to work in the broader CD area to share services across clubs? So what we did about 6 weeks ago, we got Wanganui, Hawke's Bay, New Plymouth and Race in a room, their chairman and CEO, and we talked about the opportunity to share services. They all said yes, good idea. So we've now collected a lot of data in the last 6 weeks, and that data's going to the board just to frame up what we could do. Now these things don't happen quickly, so there is an opportunity there. High-level data tells us there's 50 people employed across those clubs. How do we use them efficiently? Are there gaps in some clubs? How do we help the clubs grow the needs and wants of their regions and their communities? So the clubs in that area are actively engaged, which is really good. And the thing that I learned the other day, which try and get this done to make sure every club's got quality players. There's wagering operators in Australia that are going off the shelf to a company called BetMakers, and they're getting a piece of software and a risk management tool and data and form, all automated, and you stick a brand on the front of it, and they're turning over $6 million. Just in the way they market their brand, they capture customers. They're all using the same back end. So the Bet Deluxes, the Neds, they're all using the same back end. So why can't us as clubs do that? The money's a wash around. It comes out of NZTR, it floats around the clubs, and then goes out to participants. There are, our bigger clubs have got other transactions in terms of functions, land acquisition. So we need to talk about how clubs want to manage that in the future. So I think there's an opportunity. It's not about NZTR taking over things. We're quite open in the CD area. I've said if you want to set up a shared service in the CD, we'll consider putting our finance function in there. So we're not immune to that. Because the way this technology now is not based on the cloud, and you can be anywhere to operate that software. So we need to think differently. COVID's given us an opportunity to say, improve technology, people can be mobile, we don't necessarily have to be in the one office all the time. So that's clubs. Marketing and PR. hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a proposed framework for the licence structure on what you have to have before you get a licence, which will include a form of training and education. We have to partner with the right groups. At the moment, I have a look. If someone said, Bernard says, I want to come in and be a trainer, I've got nothing to say. You do these 10 things, you can train. We've got some of that, we need to front load that with the appropriate training.
Second question is how far away are we from registering breeders? In other words, breed horses
Yep.
need to be registered and be it before they can become named rules breed. At the moment, the box when you go out of that button is often done in an office.
Yep.
And the Lima Philadelphia, they might be
Yep. There's a responsible person, as you're aware, with the welfare rules, that does give a quasi form of registration, as long as we implement those rules, there's a misdemeanor. Haven't got an answer. We've got a lot. I'd have to say, yes, ideally, would you register breeders? Then you have to have a bunch of stewards out there. What are we trying to do with it? Because we haven't got an integrity model that is across racing. We need an integrity model across racing and breeding. I still think we've got a lot of work to do in the racing space in terms of integrity. There may be a day that there is a registration process. There is a form of registration process now with foals, breeders, stallion owners. It's whether we strengthen the rules around that, then how do you enforce compliance with that with under the integrity? That's the challenge. It's a resource issue. Not dissimilar. Australia went through exactly the same thing. The steward's going to knock on the breeder's property, walk down the driveway, and administer the rules of racing. It is a resource issue. But if we can get better, if we can get better compliance, what's the fourth thing?
Well, I thought our whole thing was that we were moving to the Australian model.
Yeah, we are.
So it is the Australian model. I mean,
Well, they're not registered as such.
they're
You're accountable.
You're accountable for them. So in effect, that is a form of registration.
It's in the development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every breed society has a register of horses that you want to be a certified breeder in that to a breed standard register stock. You need to be a member of that breed society, as I understand.
All right.
Bernard, there is one good point here, and it's lovely to hear from you. And the lady behind says the registering of breeders. That would normally, for a Wellingtonian, that would say, what a great way for me to increase my empire. You're the only Wellingtonian I've ever heard of who's not trying to increase his empire at the expense of those of us out of the
Never
province.
been
Good on
I've never
you.
been
Thank you.
I've never been called Wellingtonian. Yeah, I think that's got to evolve, and the responsible person, I think, goes down that pathway. So marketing and PR for me is how do we work with the clubs? Like NZTR doesn't want to be going out and developing marketing programs. It's not aligned with what the clubs and the sector are doing. So how do we work together in some sort of joint venture? So we're going to work through that. In the future, the Race Limited Partnership model we have to have reworked because we've lost a partner in that. We're building out the digital platforms for the clubs and partner with the clubs in that space. What that's saying is what's the next phase of that? And we'll do it with the clubs at the table. We won't try and do those things in our own. Wagering content, importantly, shared some numbers with you before. We're receiving 90% of what we think is the market in Australia with Australians betting on New Zealand racing. And how do we then grow that? How do we partner with media networks? SEN's an example where we're partnering with SEN to grow greater awareness of New Zealand racing in Australia. There are other networks. Or do we go direct to the wagering operator and say, which some of the codes in Australia are be discounting their product fee by 0.2%, and the operator says on that particular day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, bet with Victorian racing, bet with New Zealand racing. So if we can incentivise the wagering operators in Australia, which is a $26 billion market, there's an opportunity for us to grow our share of wallet in that market. So there's lots of tricks and lots of ways to do that, and we'll learn. The SEN experience I think has been really good. Not only is it creating content that we share back in Australia, we're actually sharing it through the platforms that are available in New Zealand, sharing the platforms that are available in Australia. And we need to do more of that. We don't need to be duplicating content. And it's how do we grow that market? And we've got some ideas, and Paul Batar's helping us in this space around his learnings out Sportsbet on how we might grow wagering content, wagering turnover, and ultimately revenue in those markets. And the last one there is the business of racing, undertaking a process to identify what available assets are there that the clubs can better commercialise. This isn't about NZTR keeping money. I know I keep saying that to people, I hope I'm getting that through. It's about how do we, NZTR doesn't want to be owning club land, owning the cash from the sale of assets. What we want to do is facilitate better outcomes for the industry. So you can engage with the community and you can grow presence in the regions of New Zealand. And there's a trust issue in that. There's a trust issue. It's really, really important. We're there to facilitate. And if the clubs are willing, like some of the conversations we're having today with them, if they're willing, we want to help. The last thing you want anyone to do is NZTR to come along and try and mandate. That's not the board's intention, nor the management's intention. But we do need to progress. We do need to move. And that's why we need to work together. So they're the 7 areas. The other one that Paul's asked me to look at is, should the Wellington office remain in Wellington? You can have a look at that over the next 6 months. Should we have a presence in this area, for example? That's a question. And there's all different views on that. That's not sharing problems. We're going to have a discussion. All right.
Just going back to our assets and one of the most important ones I think for you guys is to be able to make these clubs work with these clubs to be able to make it Green Fields or what's happening in Auckland. It's all well and good to say, you know, we'll work with you, and when is it ever going to happen? And you know, can I say to my children, hey, you're going to have an asset for the future of racing in the Waikato that we're going to have to be proud of, or are we going to sit for another 10 or 15 years until, you know, like, you've just got to plan for the future. And I just know, I see it as an important part of your role and the NZTR role that we have to put more pressure on to be able to build an asset for our future for the next 50 to 60 years. I mean, our forefathers built all these tracks looking to the future, and we're sort of holding on to them. But you know, where is the pressure coming from to say we have to build something for our future and for the future participants in racing? And I just, as your, I mean, just with the whole thing with the Zara report, how much pressure can we put on clubs to say, hey guys, we need to produce a better product? And it's nice to see Auckland and Avondale coming to working together. But
the Auckland Avondale position has arisen because we've been in the back around the table with the clubs, and our personalities change, emphasis changes, but I've got to say where they've got to is in a bloody good position for the next period of time. So we played a backseat role there, and we allowed Alistair Sutherland, to his credit, to come in, all 3 clubs together, 2 clubs to 3, and they're starting to be plan where we'll see mergers and we'll see the aggregation of assets and we'll see money flow, prize money and infrastructure. So
this year we've spent a lot of money already on looking at it and talking about it, but it just seems like it's the Greenfields that's just been put on the back burner again.
Yeah, no, it hasn't been. I think, Rodney, it hasn't been. It's once again, it hasn't been for them.
It's good.
So what I found with the Auckland scenario, when clubs need to move and make decisions and think about the future, the first thing they've got to consider is their community independence. As soon as you start to go public on these things, it very easily becomes a media brothel. No, it does. The media circus, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
sorry, I don't mean to be rude about this, but that's the learnings I've had. I mean, you've got to allow the clubs to build this out themselves. Yes, we'll keep pushing for having a view, which is important, but ultimately, the clubs have to vote on these things. And they have to get a majority of the members to vote on these things. We need to help them. Yes? So somewhere between that and getting something done is an answer. Alright? Okay, so that's basically the presentation. I thought what would be useful is now we can open the floor for any questions. Sorry, yeah. At the moment, we've got 52 apprentices in the system in a 4-year program. What we do realise is the current model doesn't necessarily deliver what training all the There's putting people into a system that are going to end up with a size 10 foot and never going to be flat. So there's a fundamental issue there. We're well aware of and know this is yeah, we recruit new jobs in the system. To get that right, you put the right program in place. I don't think we'll do the right program.
I think we have time to make drive and I remember having this discussion with somebody probably 8 years ago. Yeah, we're talking about more actual training club. People have been actually trained. I've got the right finders.
Well, if we can create a program in the synthetic track, that's it.
Yeah, no,
but it needs to get the track rider and the jockey up to scale reasonably.
It's been recognised the current systems about training. Sorry, years.
If the current system's not working, we recognise that and we need some ideas of how it should work better.
We were having this very conversation at track this morning. And about it, there's a bunch of trainers down here.
Yep.
Yeah, the Cambridge is that like a huge training club members in Cambridge. And a lot of trainers actually work because they're running a club.
recall in the 1980s, I was giving Maryland or Brian a hand with the cadet programs managed by breeders there involved racing jockeyship and stuff. This is how long ago was that? 35 years ago. I volunteered to go to the Matamata College. I wasn't the most glorious student. There were still some teachers there who came in that very same room. I met them. That's beside the point. Trying to convince these teachers who are influencers that there was a good career in racing called being a jockey, or even a career pathway. I just got like looks.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's improved. The conversation we're having this morning is as Danielle Johnson mentioned. They don't realise how much money you can make as a jockey, and we did make, I made the comment that Danielle's, it's inbred in her to make, from her father Peter, to make $1, knows what $1 is. How would we publicise this, for instance, out there, convincing people? And I was involved in the pony club movement back in the 90s as well, saying to little kids at the Matamata Pony Club, hey, you've been a good jockey. The mother had immediately attacked me for trying to corrupt your child. No, true.
But Dennis, there you go, you've got Danielle Johnson, who's a pin-up girl that could be out talking and actually being...
I know, utilising, she'd happily do it. Sure,
That's my exact point. What I proposed 8 years ago was the governing body to set up a travelling road show. It would take a few months to get in order. Why not approach the careers advisor of every secondary school in New Zealand? Say that you're going to have a travelling road show X month percent. Get a Danielle Johnson, get a trainer that's had successful apprentices, maybe get a James McDonald across, or a Greg Childs who's now retired, Crown Peter. It would take 4 days probably to have it in 4 years, and that's Waikato, Wellington, Christchurch. Have a presentation, follow up the invitations of your careers advisors. If you get 10% of the careers advisors of every college in New Zealand, you're still going to cover a lot more people than what is being covered at present. And they could recognise that little Johnny that loves his rugby, loves his sport, but he's always getting knocked around because he's 45 kilos. Perfect person, he might have never touched the horse, but hey, that's where they come from, or can come from. But we're letting those opportunities go, and we're not exploring them. I don't think it would be that difficult to organise, and not too costly.
Now, so, Roger, one of the, Bruce Sherry is very passionate in this space, so we have a plan to come and talk to the trainers in Waikato. Can you make sure you get that with us? Because they're exactly, we can deliver that by the end of the year in terms of setting up for the following year. So,
Partnering with New Zealand Sport and taking these steps, once we recruit these people, we'll train them.
Yep.
Also with marketing, we're very good at promoting within ourselves to the converted, but those jockeys are potentially heroes for little girls. Danielle. So why not make them outside of racing into heroes, into cover girls, into celebrities like they are in other countries where there's jockeys like Holly, whatever her name is in the UK, who was third runner-up in the Sport Person of the Year, and she's been and Jamie Carr. So I don't know. We do a lot of promoting within our industry, but not to the people who are not.
That's fair.
I mean, my heroes when I was a pony club were all the eventing heroes, the Olympians, not the jockeys, because they weren't, they weren't promoted in that way.
No, they're good comments, so we need to pick that up and have a solution.
I talked to you about this 2 years ago, sharing a road show in NZTA with the Weather home to showgrounds.
And we have, since then, we have had...
No, well, that wasn't the big one. It was just
whatever it was, we had... we did have someone at the last Equity Day, whatever it was.
We've had the mechanical horse at field days, and
yes,
year after year.
So
that goes back historically too.
Yep.
But we're not striking a chord.
No, we're not. There's a gap there.
It comes back a lot to racing's profile generally. Here in the Waikato, the centre of all of racing, and that the Waikato Times won't even put it in the field for the races anymore. You look at the television and you see basketball in the States and soccer in Ireland and all this sort of thing. In the meantime, we could have the Great North and the Dallas League, but we get no mention. Our profile, we're not, somebody needs to do something about getting us out there a lot more.
Yep, yep. It's a matter of every dollar's got multiple demands. And we have to pick the winners in it, so accept that.
That was TAB's the hero.
And the debate we had with the TAB, and they were right. They switched off radio, it's costing $2.5 million. And our wagering's up 10%. So how can I complain? $2.5 million is actually flowing to the codes today in club funds. So for all the knockers, radio doesn't work. Radio's gone. It's not coming back. You'll notice the platform that was launched a couple of weeks ago, SEN New Zealand, will come in on the 1st of June. It's a sports and racing and sports platform, which will be narrowcast through all the radio networks that TAB New Zealand own, plus digital platform into the country, and build out a profile of our participants. But that'll be a platform we could advertise. So primarily racing and sport.
You'll be preaching to the converted on that channel.
No, you're crossing into.
I can tell you in Australia, it's changed. It's put enormous pressure on the other traditional networks. It has moved the dial. It's creating different conversations. It's creating different content and creating different communities and different opportunities. So like I say, that'll be a platform that we can take our racing pathways into those markets.
So how bad is it that we can't even get the racing fields in the Waikato Club?
You've got to pay for it. It's pretty simple.
You got to pay.
TAB makes that
$15,000 a year it was going to cost just to have our fields on the 14 Fridays that we race. It's $1,000 a Friday. The only way I could do it was take an ad for a pay. And at the end of the day, with them being in the Herald, I used to get rings from, I got sick and tired of getting all the old ladies ringing that they're not in the paper, and I just told them to buy the Herald. So hopefully they changed and bought the Herald. But that's the only way, because they're syndicated. And to be fair to the editor here, he has 2 pages that he has any control over. So the rest of it's a syndicated model that I think it's the front page and maybe page 3 that he has control over. The rest of it he just gets sent the template. So the only way we could look at doing it was taking an ad. But when the Herald deal was done, it didn't make any sense for me to spend $15,000. So the old ladies that rang, I tell them to get the Herald instead. That's just the reality.
That's the publishing company decision, Frank, and you can't get around that.
The future is the internet.
Yeah.
We've just got to learn to be more compliant and efficient on the internet. The paper, less and less people read them anymore. They couldn't care less. The upcoming generation do everything on their phones through the internet.
Yeah,
and that's where you can get all the fields on your phone.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I haven't convinced my mum at 83. She has that every weekend. Picks up all the news off the internet now. And you just, I mean, that is the world we're living in, and it's richer. Once you'll find, once you go on it, you won't come off it. I know that might sound really stupid, but you won't come off it. As long as you keep, it is there, it's a rich source of information. It can tell you a lot of things about racing.
I do get a bit incensed though when I go to tune in, see what's happened where the thing spins round, it says data not available at the moment, check later.
Yeah, no, that's frustrating. So have you seen, on the Love Racing site, we do stream the Trackside 1 and Trackside 2 to Love Racing. So who in the room sees that for free?
Yeah, but it's very hard, I try all the time about our connections.
That's a broader, that's a New Zealand internet.
Yeah, that's
You
what
know, that's not,
everybody.
Bernie can't fix that.
No.
Where we started from,
frustrating.
well, in the CD yesterday, there were 50 people on there, there's one person watching. So we've got to keep promoting it. There is an effort, it's a speed issue around internet and access. But we've got 4,000 people a month coming to that use that now. It started at 0, so we've got to keep building it, because if you're only having Sky for racing, don't need Sky, you just go straight to the platform and see it. If you're using it for other sport.
Why would you draw people to that as opposed to the TAB's website? Isn't it the same content?
And wouldn't you be better having them on the TAB so they can also gamble?
Yeah. People are already doing that. Are you saying you don't want it on the site?
No, I'm just
it doesn't bother me because I can look at it on the tab as well.
Well, I think anywhere we can push vision and show the sport, whether it's on a wagering app, whether it's on a digital app like Club Racing, I think it hasn't cost us anything outside of a bit of tweaking in a programming to push the picture there. We don't pay for the industry. The industry's got, we all know to have a trackside, it's an asset for the industry. And we're not going and creating more money to create another channel. It's there.
I suppose it's getting people that may have some undertone or suspicion about the gambling side of the sport and gives them an opportunity to watch without any gambling association, right?
Yeah. We hope that's what it is. But of course, again, everyone knows what it is.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in the jumping side of racing, and as you know, it takes a hell of a lot longer and it costs a lot more money to get a jumper ready to run in a race. And yet we have this ludicrous situation where maiden jumpers win a race and get less than an 1100 metre maiden race at Timaru on a Thursday. And the recent calendar program that's just been sent out to us all, 90% of the jumps races when it comes to stakes, it says TBA.
The open entry races. Because you don't know what you're going to run. So it has to be.
Now, it's very hard to plan with.
Yeah.
Well, it's either 10 or 20.
It's not only the open entries either.
Yeah. So I have to say that down on the South Island, we've said to the bottom half of the South Island that we can't get our average field sizes up. You know, what good here in the North Island. The future of jump racing is really in the hands of the participants.
And the punters, just to put
Well,
on it too.
But the average field size is the key for all this.
Field sizes last year, the jumping family held up very well right through, right?
Yeah, and the North Island, yeah.
Because there's no South Island.
It's very hard to make a bob though.
Yeah, it's up. Well, I think you'll find all owners will say that. Yeah, you're right. Understood.
Vernon, any thoughts as to what the optimum number of races is going to be in the next couple of years? I see if you go 2 seasons back, we ran 2,560. Last year with COVID, 1,900 odd. This year, I think we've run 1,600 so far. Do you have any vision as to what the optimum number of races will
race
be?
meetings will come from 312 down to the COVID year of 280 and programmed for 21-22 290 race meetings with the flexibility of having something to the board, a budget that can say we have to divide races, we would. We'll add races. If we have to add a race meeting, we could. If the demand's there, our preference would be to use the existing infrastructure and number of race meetings to run our races right across the country. What's the optimum number? Looks like our foals, are they down 200 this year, so that's going to have an impact in the next 2 or 3 years. Replacing 3,300. So. But the sales, I mean, there's more horses that have been bought. Is this right? Have I got this right?
Yeah,
more Kiwis bought horses at sales, and are going to keep them in this country to race. So that's a positive.
But two are sold. A lot of them are selling.
They are
for big money. So as older horses.
Yeah. Okay.
Out of those 290, 300 meetings, what's the total cost over?
52 million.
And how much does clubs for the right under 52 million?
2 million.
2 million out of 52. Do you think clubs, some clubs, underperforming some sponsorship?
No, I think it's a factor of where the industry is at, the way the funding model works. I mean, we rely on clubs being able to put on industry days.
Oh yeah, there's some clubs, I know some clubs are big, the small ones.
But outside of the event days where clubs can get earned, the rest of them are put on for the industry. Right? And the reality is they're on days where clubs won't want them anyway. So there's a club funding model that has to sustain. Maybe I share that with you, and it shows how we fund events. We do that in cooperation with clubs. So not every club says, wow, I want racing in the middle of winter on a Thursday afternoon. It's not a matter of jumping up and down. So it's, you know, every club will say they'd rather race in Saturday in the spring or the summer or the autumn. But we've got it present, and importantly, 90% not only a presence in New Zealand, but also in the Australian market. And we've also got a market opening up with our racing being seen in the US. You'll have seen this legislation changing in the US where each of the states there are opening up their gambling and regulating gambling. That provides an opportunity for us that we need to be front and centre. So the more product, the better. We've got to do it based on the available horse population. None of that is ever exact because we're not dealing with growth. It is a challenge.
I think in respect to clubs being called to task over their input into stakes, there needs to be a greater understanding by the industry at large as to the job clubs do under pretty much, not entirely, but very much reliant on voluntary input from people who would rather be doing something else with their time like that.
I think it's fair to say the funding model over 20 years where clubs used to determine stakes has been centralised to accommodate the spread of racing that we need for a lot of wagering purposes not only here in Australia. So I think the clubs do an amazing job. What they do, how they do it, under the circumstances they need to do it.
Bernard, we all depend on the TABNZ and what it was in the past. Now, there's been a strong influence from DIA. Would you like to comment on that and the personnel that's been available and the effects on the present selections that are being turned down by the Minister?
Yeah.
We all want to know what's going on at the top. We all depend on that.
Yeah, so I think I can only reiterate what the Deputy Prime Minister has said to us. Don't come back to me. The legislation's in place. I'll appoint the two boards. You get on and run the business. You've got the levers to run the business. And that's what we've got to do. So I'd say, as I said before, the Deputy Prime Minister is great to have a person of that stature within government to be also the racing minister. So I think it's an important part of the development of racing, but it's over to us to drive the change. Let's make that very clear. Don't ask Winston or Grant for help. Fix it yourself.
Department's still got a very strong influence with the TAB.
Yeah, but particularly through this phase around setting up the RIB, setting up TAB New Zealand, once that's done, you won't find the DIO sticking their nose in.
Isn't that under some sort of government statute that they have to have a hand on?
Yeah.
For the selection
Well,
process?
it's basically the licence. The approval to bet in this market is granted by the government. They're a partner in our business. You can't, without them, we wouldn't have got the tax break, 13 million. We wouldn't have been able to get the legislation that allows us to charge Australian wagering operators. If Australian wagering operators don't pay for betting on New Zealand racing, they can be charged. The industry can't do that themselves. We've got a real heavyweight in terms of the government who's standing right behind us to make sure there's a fee that comes back to this industry, the three-code industry. So they are an important partner. I used to have this debate in Victoria. They are a partner in our business. They allow us to run a business. So we can't say we don't want to deal with government. They are a partner. As our clubs are a partner. As our breeders are partners. As our jockeys.
Sorry.
I think that does that answer your question? Or
some of it.
Okay.
Would it be better off being run by having an oversight on the portfolio under a racing minister, or going back to the old DIA portfolio that was back in Mr. Seith's day, back in about the 1970s?
No,
It's a
I
question
think
we need to ask ourselves.
I think if you're going to have a minister, having the Deputy Prime Minister, well, the last two have been Deputy Prime Ministers, so I've got to say, pretty good position. Now the industry, now the government's saying, get on with it. I think that's what we're going to do.
I think we're lucky we've got a minister at all. Other countries don't have a racing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Bernard, we bleated long and hard about being allowed to run our own business, didn't we? All through Winston's years, and I think we got what we asked for, and now it's
It's up to us.
get on and do it.
Spot on, Jamie, spot on.
Bernard, in finance doesn't directly relate to you, but with your relationship with TAB, are they still looking at the most crucial part of this, like what was outsourcing TAB? Are they still investigating that further as it's going to be applied.
Yeah, and part of their SOI to the government will be what does the future model look like? And the TAB are working on a number of options.
Yeah.
And they'll share them with the industry at the appropriate time. But you know, the industry internationally and globally is changing quickly, and they're across the things that are happening. All right. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming in. The rain's slowed, and I think we're just about to have some lunch, but appreciate your time. And
just before I just got a note from Ashley downstairs. There's a white Isuzu 4-wheel drive, number plate KAM 126, and the lights are on full beam. So if that's someone that might want to check it out.
And also I think it's important with new board that if anyone's ever got any problems or ideas or just even complaints, just make them known rather than just gas bag them wherever it's out. Come to us because we don't know what the problems are if you're not communicating to us. And we'll be as open in our communication as we can be with the participants as well.
Brendan, just with, I think I've discussed it with you before, but there seems to be the relationship between the TAB and NZTR in terms of bet types and all that sort of thing, promotions. It just doesn't seem to be a game plan at the moment. You know, as you go onto the front page of the TAB and you're on a big day's race, and they could be promoting our 3-year-olds running in Australia. They've got soccer from Brazil or whatever. You know, how much say are you guys having in some of these? A lot of the young guys like these multi-bets. They bet on a horse going into a Super 12 rugby game or something. There's real opportunity which will increase turnover. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we do have discussions around that, but they have got the experts internally that drives. They know what drives a punter's behaviour. Right? They've got bookmakers, they've got analysts poring over that stuff on a daily basis. The positioning of sport and offers on the site. I say there should be more offerings of racing. I go to the Australian sites, and the Australian sites do change up a bit too. They shop from sport to racing. I've got to leave that to the experts. I mean, I'm a punter, a small punter. Do I know everything about wagering? The analysts know more about wagering than we do. They know exactly what you and I are punting through the TAB. They know exactly what ticks our boxes, and they'll push offers to you. Good thing is our wagering's up. We need more people betting. I think that's an issue for us. There's about 110,000 people actively betting through the app, and then we've got the retail network. Now I'm going to push hard to make sure that retail network is upgraded and still advocate for those things, absolutely. And we've got a meeting next Wednesday with the TAB to talk through timings of that, how to work together with Trackside and the different promotions they do. We need to be siloed. And that's all work that's come out of COVID. We've had to cut some services, as you're well aware, and we're now going to try and work together to bring it back under a cooperative approach to developing the 3 codes and TAB betting.
One thing, Bernard, you spoke about the analysts, and I think the analysts at TAB NZ are quite incompetent. I'll give an example. I'm watching a race from the United States where the win, the place, the Quinoa, and the trifecta pools all added up together, all 4 of them added up together, came to $16. Sometimes I go to a pub where the pub bookie will not take a bet of less than 20. This is from Balfour in the north to Oban in the south. Do you know where Oban is? It's all right here. The total turnover was $16, and these analysts still run that sort of truck.
Well,
Bernard, it is an insult.
But what I should do, I'll show you that some of the numbers that have been I'm not going to pick individual destinations, but that market in the morning, that's what we talk about, it is growing. So there's people wanting to bet on that stuff.
What Dean McKenzie, when he spoke to the board, he said it's not so much about the profit they're making, it's the competitors between their products. So they have to show.
Yeah,
it's always people who want to bet will go somewhere else and go on the race.
And those markets, the polls you're alluding to don't show the fixed odds.
No, so I'll just give you an idea. Anyway, the numbers in that space are rather dramatic. We're talking millions of dollars that are being bet by individuals somewhere in New Zealand on that racing track. better to run more racing, because that can give you a return. We're in an hour show about some sport, and that doesn't give you a return.
It's also part of the reciprocal international arrangements, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
That's why someone in America might be complaining about a race coming in from Wanganui that they're watching.
We want our racing shown in the States too.
Why is this
There is reciprocal arrangements, that's good. All right, yes, mate. Brett Scully is
Yes, there's a handicap and review meeting, was to be Thursday, but Charles can change, so I think it's what to do.
If anyone has complaints,
I'll see you in a bit.
Ford traders asked for the last 6 months.
Tim Aldridge is the racing manager, is the person to talk to.
Yeah, so, as long as just,
All right. Thanks everybody. Appreciate your time and keep enjoying the racing. And we'll be back. And then we do Facebook Lives. There is a monthly industry publication for the stakeholders of the clubs that comes out. So any other ideas you've got, as Bruce said, in terms of improving communication, any issues, we're here. All right. And I'm talking to people all the time, so I'm not afraid to talk and have the discussion, solve the problem when you can, or say that's in progress, or I can't do it. See if I can't do it. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ben.